On December 11th, 2020, Travis Samox Beauchamp released Metagame. This 8-part documentary series chronicled the grassroots scene of Super Smash Bros. Melee, with its story centralized around 5 players who somehow became legends. From a creative perspective, it was almost scary how cleanly these players fit into the so-called script that was Melee. Because look, I know a lot of you don't do this for a living, so let me set the stage for you. Just imagine for a second someone assigned you the task of crafting a compelling narrative around a bunch of nerdy teenagers based on a now 25-year-old video game on a console that isn't even sold anymore, all while being overshadowed by a successful sequel after a successful sequel after a successful sequel. Maybe it's that specificity that makes it so strange though. That a niche community powered by passionate volunteers and heavy cathode ray tube televisions could produce a story compelling enough to deserve this level of cinematic treatment. Because with all of that going against it, Melee and its 5 gods never should have worked. Okay, so Super Smash Bros. Melee released in 2001, and for fans of my channel, you probably already know the deal by now, but it was as grassroots as it comes. The game was, for lack of a better word, messy, unbalanced, and absolutely not built for the formal, buttoned-up esports ecosystem you may see from other mainstream titles. Combine that with Nintendo's sheer, hatred for their own games, I guess, and there was no developer support in sight, which is perhaps a story for another video. That meant no patches, it barely had prize pools, sponsors were difficult to come by, hell, it didn't even have modern technology to play it on, quite literally nothing you would expect from a modern competitive game. And yet, people still played. What emerged was a brutally technical meta that is still advancing to this day, featuring things like wave dashing, L canceling, shield pressure, tech jacing, Koopa backdash, wave slide, hoverwalk, moonlands, you get it. Movement and finesse that rewarded time and dedication without all that much of a tangible reward. This game was a sandbox for the obsessive, but more importantly, it felt like it was the purest form of skill expression. You didn't win because your character got buffed or because you dodged nerfs in the latest patch, you won because you were simply better than your opponent at Melee, and your hands could keep up. That is the world Metagame drops us into. Not the bright lights of the LCS or EVO grand stages, but hotel lobbies, some dude's house, and less than appropriate trash talk. By nearly all metrics, this is a story that should not have been epic, but it was.
What's up YouTube? It's your favorite Into the AM sponsored gamer, me, Rotate It Downwards for Walter, here to tell you about today's sponsor. You already know it's Into the AM. Oh my god. God, that felt terrible. Are people actually like this? Okay, thank you once again to my good friends at Into the AM, who have paid to be mentioned in today's video. If you've been watching my channel for a bit, you probably already know how I feel about Into the AM. They're my longest standing partnership, I really do believe in their products a lot, and I wouldn't be endorsing them as much as I am if I didn't actually mean it. My favorite thing about Into the AM though is in just how versatile their clothing is, while also being really high quality and really affordable. That means I can get a lot of outfits out of single items, and especially with the weather starting to change up, layering is my jam. They have sales practically every month, and if you use my code WALT or go to intotheam.com/WALT, you'll get 10% off at checkout too. This is a reminder for anyone who may be new to the channel, but I try to be as transparent as these brands will allow me to be, so in the spirit of that transparency, any purchases you make with my link also gives me a small kickback and kinda helps me get more sponsors, so thanks. Anyway, thanks as always to Into the AM for supporting me and the channel, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. At the center of Samox's metagame were 5 figures who defined a generation of the game, the 5 gods of Melee. Jason Mewtwo King Zimmerman, the robotic master of frame data and edge guards, Joseph Mango Marquez, the man of the people, a hype-generating wildcard. Kevin PPMD Nanny, the philosopher king from North Carolina with razor-sharp neutral. Adam Armada Lindgren, the Swedish sniper, a paragon of consistency. And Juan Hungrybox Debiedma, the lone puff main, thriving against all odds. Each one of these players carved out a completely different style, identity, and fan base. Oh yeah, and they all played different characters too at this time. God, that was so cool, but for a time, these 5 players were literally untouchable. They were so good, in fact, that for the so-called era of the 5 gods, they were pretty much the only players who won. From 2008 to 2015, an over 7-year-long span, if at least 2 of the gods went to any tournament, one of them won, guaranteed. Now, you may think that a level of dominance like that would be boring, and in other competitive scenes, it might be. But for Melee, a game known for being seemingly impossible to master, that reign felt incomprehensible.
That is the whimsy metagame captures, not just the origin and supremacy of the five gods, but the sheer impossibility of their existence. Okay, now consider this. It's one thing to have a dominant force commanding over competition with an iron grip, but how exactly does a scene like Melee's, one that relied on volunteer efforts, flavor of the month cash cows, and a tournament ecosystem often funded by fans themselves, manage to produce not just one, but 5 of these enduring titans, all at nearly the same time? That is honestly insane, and it definitely did metagame some favors, but from a strict story perspective, the Five Gods narrative has all of the clean beats of your favorite scripted shows. Rivalries, redemption arcs, international clashes, battles of concepts, but all of this happened in a game with 0 developer support. There wasn't a Riot Games to balance or even host tournaments for that matter, no Capcom fighters with a Pro Tour, not even an EVO, or barely. Nintendo didn't just ignore Melee, they actively worked against it. Events were sent cease and desist, costing them upwards of 6 figures worth of investment, or in the case of a game like Project M, you got shuffled off into the underground so as to not get in trouble for playing a game you liked. Sponsorships, especially for players not necessarily focused on marketing themselves, were rare. For years, the top players of Melee barely, if ever, profited.
They're trying to get 70% of the $45.
By nearly all metrics, the Melee scene probably should have died years ago, but it didn't. The Five Gods emerged not because the scene had this plethora of resources, but instead came about as kind of a giant f*** you to that. Each one of them grinded harder, traveled further, studied more, and played longer than anyone else, and that created a damn near perfect story for metagame. They rose in complete contrast to the game's seemingly unstable ecosystem. While Melee's meta was chaotic, unruly, and perhaps impossible to ever perfect, the Five Gods as they were presented in metagame were order. So I feel like we should get back to the core of this video, which is why did metagame even work? Why are the Five Gods such a powerful narrative device, so much so that the community even jokes now about if the era of the Five Gods is over? Almost all of them, in one way or another, have graduated from the scene at this point. Armada, PPMD, and Mewtwo King are all functionally retired. Armada's pursuing Mario 64 speedrunning, even reaching a top 10 in the world time in the 70-star category. PPMD has slowly started to re-enter the scene in small doses as a commentator, and I've personally had a blast getting to commentate with one of the legends of the game. Mewtwo King still streams and even coaches players like Hungrybox, the now only active Melee god in this new era. And Mango, although involved in controversy in 2025, may find the fire return to him when he's allowed to compete again. Even though we've lost the full fervor of competition that the Five Gods brought, the narrative surrounding them worked because it gave us everything. Rivalries. Mango vs Armada was considered one of the greatest player matchups in any esport, not just in gameplay, but in their battle for the title of greatest of all time. Tragedy. PPMD exited the scene in a blaze of glory, winning Apex 2015 in unprecedented circumstances and leaving fans wondering what could have been. Perseverance. Hungrybox was booed, mocked, and had a fucking crab thrown at him, and yet he never gave up. Consistency. Armada challenged what it meant to be perfect in a game where perfection was seemingly impossible. And reinvention. Mewtwo King proved that he could be the best through sheer willpower. Each of the gods' journeys were human, flawed, and unpredictable, and yet their domination was nothing of the sort. The fact that this narrative emerged organically without game developers artificially scripting its rivalries with cash injections or making their own documentaries about it made it feel so much more real. I'd hate to say that my good friend Travis captured lightning in a bottle, but he really did with this one. The Five Gods were the ultimate grassroots epic. So, for the reasons I just listed, I think it's safe to say the era of the Five Gods is probably over. But like all things, there is a new generation, led by young and budding talent, and in some ways, they're better at Melee. From a sheer technical standpoint, these players are faster, cleaner, and much more optimized. But they're not gods. Not like them. Why? It's simple, because the mythology had already been etched in stone. The era where dominance could be built by raw effort in a seemingly broken game with no support, that era is gone. And that's okay. Every legend needs a proper ending, and the Five Gods didn't just shape the narrative of Melee, they carried it. The Five Gods never should have worked. They never should have emerged from the silly, broke 2001 party game. They never should have maintained their near decade-long grip on a rapidly evolving meta. They never should have created a storyline better than anything any other Tier 1 esport could write. And yet, they did. Not because Melee was built for greatness, no, but because it demanded greatness from the few who could rise above it. So the next time someone tells you that old games can't last, that grassroots scenes can't produce legends, tell them about the Five Gods, and tell them that there are new stories still being written in Melee even to this day. Thanks for watching. Hey, thank you so much for watching. This video was a bit experimental, I'm not gonna lie, but it was sitting on the shelf for a while and I wanted to give it a go since I have a lot of videos publishing this month, so I hope you still liked it. If you did, do me a favor and interact with it in some way so YouTube will tell me this video is a 1 out of 10 and I'm really awesome. Anyway, this channel is funded by my Patreon and YouTube memberships, thanks to Avishua Stein, Bobby Wasabi, Dark Genix, Eric is Cool, Gustavo Cantu Fernandez, Henry Huang, Ian, James Fabman, Jazz the Pirate, Justin Duncan Mills, Kyle Carlin, Marshall Bradley, and Sam Wright.